Hi, and welcome to ThePrint. My name is Karanjeet Kaur, and I'm a writer and an editor. Let's talk today about Dhurandhar. An early scene in Dhurandhar the Revenge presages a kind of revisionism present throughout the film. The Intelligence Bureau Chief, Ajay Sanyal, played by R. Madhavan, attempts to enlist a broken Jaskirat Singh Rangi, a death row convict who has been handpicked and spirited out of jail. Jaskirat only wants the release of an anonymous death, but Sanyal counters that sentiment with a rousing Sikh prayer. Sanyal exhorts, Sura so pehchaniye, jo lade deen ke het, purja purja kat mare, kabhu na chhadde khet. Loosely translated, the lines mean that a true spiritual warrior is one who fights for the rights of the oppressed and does not abandon the battlefield even when his body is demolished part by part. It's a beautiful, stirring call to courage that several TV shows and films have deployed. But perhaps its best use is in the national award-winning Tamas from 1988. Govind Nihalani's devastating film, also set in Pakistan but during India's partition, lies on the opposite end of the ideological spectrum from Dhurandhar. If a congregation chants Jo Lade Deen Ke Het right before plunging to their deaths in Tamas, Dhurandhar uses it to justify the murderous rampage it's about to embark on. And just like that, a prayer, shorn of its original context and meaning to hold your ground in times of adversity, is conscripted in the service of propaganda. Dhurandhar repeats this exercise with its soundtrack. It sets a wide-ranging playlist of bangers from the 80s and 90s as no-context background music for high-speed chases, suicide missions, and newer, more depraved ways of stripping bodies for parts. But it does it most sloppily to rehabilitate one of the most painful eras in India's economic life, demonetization. In Dhurandhar the Revenge, the 2016 demonetization is rebranded Operation Greenleaf. In the film's telling, Pakistani intelligence and underworld operatives, including a fictionalized Dawood Ibrahim, have funneled 60,000 crore rupees in counterfeit notes into India, specifically to buy the Uttar Pradesh elections. The Prime Minister's televised address from 8 November 2016 is lifted wholesale and inserted into the film. This masterstroke, the film proposes, was merely the public face of a covert military strike. It is an audacious retcon, but it only works if you don't remember what actually happened. Dhurandhar 2 is untroubled by what followed demonetization. Facts are for pesky liberals and documentaries. The minor suffering of ordinary Indians is a small price to pay when a war is being fought around them, above them, and entirely without their knowledge. The nation is collateral in its own rescue. Dhurandhar the Revenge asks, what greater honor is there? This extraordinary manipulation works like a charm when you depict the Kandahar hijack or the 2611 attacks. Both these incidents are seared into public memory. But for the majority of Indians, there is no personal connection with these terrifying cataclysmic events. The same is not true for demonetization. I watched that speech like millions of Indians. I was in the office of the online magazine I used to edit, and to this day, anytime there is an announcement of an 8 p.m. address by the PM, I begin palpitating. Within minutes, our office emptied out. Everyone from the management to the office helpers hot-footed it to the nearest ATM. On the walk back home through Bandra, one of Mumbai's more expensive postcodes, and a neighborhood that is constitutionally incapable of being quiet, panic and paranoia were writ large on every face. If this were Bandra, you could only imagine what was happening everywhere else. But you didn't have to imagine for long. The days that followed produced stories and images that refused to leave. The elderly man crying helplessly at the bank. The farmers who couldn't buy seed for the rabi crop. The single mother who burnt the notes she couldn't exchange in time. The blind beggar who had saved 65,000 rupees over 20 years in notes that were rendered worthless. The Center for Monitoring Indian Economy estimated the cost to the economy at 1.28 lakh crore rupees in the first 50 days alone. But can that figure account for the scale of human suffering? From a government that counts, remarkably, even India's tortuous path through COVID among its achievements, there are no anniversary addresses, no choreographed celebrations of a masterstroke. 3 years ago, Congress spokesperson Supriya Srinath said as much during a TV debate. If the BJP did think of this as a victory and a masterstroke, then they would have mentioned demonetization when they celebrate their anniversary of being in power. But not once has demonetization been mentioned, much like Achhe Din. That's partly because the numbers make silence the only dignified option. The RBI's own annual report said that 99.3% of the demonetized currency returned to the banking system. Black money hoarders, wherever they might have been, survived. I imagine they all now have a foot in Goa, diversifying into real estate. There is an image so embedded in the Indian imagination that it has become shorthand for corruption itself. Jute sacks full of black money stuffed under the bed or into the mattress. Bolstered by Bollywood, this image appears in raid coverage, in political speeches, and anti-corruption campaigns. It is so powerful, so legible, that the consensus for demonetization was built on it. In his 8th November address, the Prime Minister had asked, which honest citizen would not be pained by reports of crores worth of currency notes stashed under the beds of government officers, or by reports of cash found in gunny bags? The problem is that this picture is incomplete. Black money in India is not only held in cash. It lives in land, in second houses, in gold, in overseas shell companies, in the instruments of political finance that would flourish in demonetization's wake. Economist Arun Kumar, whose 2018 book, Demonetization and the Black Economy, is a rigorous forensic account of the policy, notes that the unorganized sector nearly collapsed. Remember that the sector accounts for 45% of the Indian GDP, employs the bulk of our workforce, and runs almost entirely on cash. Yet, this is an image that refuses to vacate the public consciousness for good reason. In March 2025, 8 years after demonetization was meant to break the back of black money hoarders, firefighters responding to a blaze at the Delhi residence of High Court Judge Justice Yashwant Verma reportedly spotted jute sacks full of cash in the outhouse. Justice Verma would go on to label them stationery and court papers, but also a conspiracy hatched against him. Dhurandhar the revenge plot rests on the specific claim that Pakistani counterfeit notes were flooding India's financial system. In reality, it is worth knowing that counterfeit currency accounted for approximately 0.025% of total circulation in 2016. The entire fictional emergency of the film is constructed around an amount that could be a rounding error. In a more self-aware film, this might have been a punchline. Alongside counterfeit currency, the shifting goalposts of demonetization also included the specter of terror financing, which the film references. To which we can only say, the attacks on India since then are a matter of record, whether they occurred in Amarnath in 2017, or Pulwama in 2019, or Pahalgam or Delhi, both in 2025. What the policy did generate with some efficiency was new avenues for black money. Arun Kumar documents how the rich deployed the poor as money mules, running old notes through Jan Dhan accounts open for the purpose. Shell companies and Hawala networks moved and legitimized funds. If there is any justice in this, it is small. The sequel has ended up alienating many viewers that the first film so carefully reeled in. The first part cannily hooked them by deeply embedding its characters and storyline in Lyari. Its super slick action and textured world building yielded an entertainer that even liberal viewers allowed themselves to be seduced by. But the sequel has pulled the rug. Together, liberal and right-wing viewers have arrived at the same realization, that the world that they were so willingly inside was simply a vehicle for laundering government policy all along. So you find everyone talking about how the acting is extraordinary, the music is so well sampled, and that the action sequences are breathtaking. Because that's about the only thing you can say about a film that has pulled off a bait and switch. The audacity, at least, is eye-opening. For 9 years, the government's silence on demonetization was its smartest move. Dhurandhar the Revenge has one-shotted that silence by reminding an entire country of exactly what was done to them. The nation is, once again, collateral in its own rescue.